Alrighty. Hallelujah, Abba. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Whatever oath. Once again, Father, once again and never enough, we are here to praise thee. We are here to exalt thy name. We are here to seek thy besodi, like thy I'm lacking words, Father, because that was so amazing and so great that no language but thine own language, no words but thine own word can show a glimmer of what it means, Father, for us to be able to find thee, to be able to seek and find thee, to call on to thee, and to actually have thou respond to us, to turn thy countenance towards us, to bless us with thy loving chesed, with thy mercy, with thy love, with thy justice, Father. We praise thee and we come together to exalt thy name by seeking into thy command, into thy lamed, thy word and thy direction, to find thy Derek, Yashar Derek, which thou hast bestowed us, like it's in front of us, Father, and thou shines a light upon it so that we may find it easily, that we may not stumble. We ask, God, that thou will protect us from the distractions of the world and help us stay connected and focused in who thou art. Thy Shem, Yahweh, Sevaot, El Elyon. Amen.
Amen. So this is part 3 of the series called Sefer ALEF-TAV. So if you look at Genesis 1:1, Bereshit, we talked about that word Bereshit, Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, Tav, last week a little bit. Another way to read that, just a reference. Stan Tenen had call it a group or a study that he called Meru, M-E-R-U, which is a mystical mountain of wisdom or knowledge or something, which stems out of India, I believe. But anyway, he was a mathematician, and he said he had a brain for recognizing patterns. And as fun doing mathematical exploits, you might say, when he is, as I heard him story, I related to him being in high school or something, math club, and there'd be challenges. And as say the professor or somebody was writing an equation on the chalkboard, you had to be able to see what he was doing and know where he was going so you could get to the answer before he even finished writing it and have your hand up and say, I got the answer. That was the kind of guy Stan Tenen was. He was an astrophysicist, Jewish, but he said, when he was raised Jewish household, Jewish culture, okay, so you had to learn to read Hebrew, but he didn't care about the meaning of the letters or the meaning of the doctrines. You just learn to recognize the letters and move on. And I've talked to some people that were raised Jewish and asked them about the meaning of it. I remember one time I met some guy at some art show, and I was just learning the language, and I said, something about the Dalit, and he's what it means, this doorway. That he says, I have no idea. It's like, aren't you Jewish? It's like you go to the bar mitzvah and you move on. It's like you have to learn how to read something, but it's like they don't necessarily attach a value. It's something that you do as a standard procedure for your culture, perhaps even your religion, maybe your nationality. But this idea of SEPhERing ALEF-TAV, or attaching a value to the spelling of every individual word and the meaning of each individual letter, is not typical, not common, not what all those other people, whoever they might be, it's not what they do. Just so you know, it's an elective course, you might say, not required. So I'm not even trying to suggest that, well, if you want to really get into heaven or get a better status, a degree, in the heavenlies, in the by and by, learn how to read Hebrew. I'm not saying that. I'm suggesting it's a very rewarding thing to do, and that there's much to be gained for the sake of doing it. But it's certainly not that salvation is dependent on anybody knowing how to read Hebrew, or that there's perhaps any benefit at all. It's just something to do. Now, that being said, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was going to change the orientation of his life. He's been a builder, a mechanic, and busy building and doing and repairing and making things. And he's going to get rid of his tools and study the Bible. It's like, what does that look like? It's like changing your whole frame of reference on who you are. The guy that we used to know that was the builder, repairer of objects is essentially deceased. And now this new individual that nobody's ever met before, how are you going to study the Bible? And if for me to try to imagine that, I look back at my earlier days, I studied the Bible quite a bit, but I was reading English words, occasionally looking something up in Strong's Concordance, or there was something called Matthew Henry's Commentary. I remember back in my high school days, the church kind of favored that. What did he have to say? There's Brown Driver Big. Somebody brought that to my attention. And then I saw a book once that said virtually every lexicon, dictionary, concordance, commentary was written by corrupt individuals. And it actually had done research and compiled who were these people, what organization were they with, and they then were suspicious or absolutely disparaged the, you might say, the personal integrity of all these writers. And the writer of that book was saying, if you want to know the truth, do not fix your attention onto what any of these guys wrote. And it was a rather thick book. It was quite a bit of, you might say, study, research, expose. It's like, well, then how are you supposed to study the Bible if you can't trust the forefathers of the publications? And then King James, I mean, King James was inspired by the Holy Spirit. So, well, at least his translators were. Well, the translators that borrowed the stuff from Tyndale that they martyred because, they changed the, you start looking and it's like, gosh, everything is spurious, is questionable, is doubtful, is what the heck is going on? Well, so you have to put in your own effort. Yeah, but how do you trust yourself if you don't even know? You got to learn how to read. Either trust yourself to do a good job, or trust somebody else that you know is probably not going to do a job, because that's the way that those people do stuff. It's like, well, then to what do we hang on, do we trust for our salvation? And when I say our salvation, in the Christian sense, salvation means you're saved from being pitched into the lake of fire after the resurrection, and you make it into the heavenlies, the celestial realm, whatever that means. If you read what looks like the Old Testament, Daniel, last verse of Daniel 12, last verse of the whole book of Daniel, and arise to your portion at the end of days. Okay, rise to your portion at the end of days. I asked a Jewish friend many years ago, Christians have this great hope, the great hope, salvation. When I die, I get to go to heaven. Jesus has gone before me and prepared a place in his Father's house. And he's no longer on the earth, and he goes to heaven, prepares a place. So when I die, I transcend the discrepancy, the barrier between the heavenly realm and the earth realm. When I die, I transcend that, go into the heavenly realm. That's a Christian version of salvation. But the word zadika in Hebrew, zadi dalet kuf, righteous, zadika, righteousness, also means deliverance and salvation and justice and virtue and piety, correctness, merit. But what is that? Is that the same thing as salvation? Well, if I'm in trouble legally, financially, circumstantially, medically on earth, some natural event, a hurricane, a flood, a fire, something happens and help, rescue me, save me. That could be Zadika. Zadika is also victory and justice. Mishvat, right ruling, that's a little different, but righteousness and justice, Zadika and Mishvat go hand in hand. It's talked about quite often. Those two are coupled, paired together. Different aspects, maybe two sides of a same coin kind of idea. If Mishvat is a balancing of scales, peitet, memshin peitet. Peitet means that it's a stalemate, like a tied score. Nobody's ahead in a sports engagement. Shin peitet, shofet is the word for judge. Shofetim, the book of Judges. Mishvat, the place or the occasion of making determinations. That's like being in a court case. That could be a place of meting out equity. Meet, M-E-T-E, as in metering, or evaluating and seeing to it that the value or the quantity or quality of what this person gets goes there and the other goes there. So you could say Judgment Day, the ultimate, after we die, we get resurrected, we stand in front of the great white throne. That's the great day of Mishpat. Just so you understand the meaning of the word and the use of it, because you'll see different translate. One of them is called right ruling. I think it's the ISR Bible calls Mishpat right ruling. And it's like, right ruling? Well, making the right determination about what? How do you wrap your mind around the words? And when you have the English words and you're trying to make sense, and then you go to look in the concordance or the dictionary, lexicon, commentary, those guys that wrote those books, like I said, the Presbyterian Church was kind of suggesting that Matthew Henry's commentary was the reliable one because it promoted their ideology. Doesn't mean it's correct. It just means as far as they could tell, it was the most correct. For example, in Stone's Tanakh, it's my understanding, and I think it talks about it in the beginning of the book, that there's different sect, S-E-C-T, sects, there's different sects of Jews where they have different doctrinal perspectives. And half a dozen of them got together in the late 1980s, basically, or mid 80s, and compiled this English translation of the Stone's Tanakh. So they don't necessarily all agree that that's the best translation or the only translation, but they've agreed to have generally, okay, that's a pretty good English version. Doesn't mean it's accurate. So you can't trust that English translation. It's like, well, then what do you trust? So if my friend is going to study the Bible, or if I'm going to study the Bible, if all I have is the English, or even if I have the Greek, from what I understand, there was 30,000 different Greek manuscripts, written documents throughout history, and no two match 100% word for word, letter for letter across the entire manuscript. And then you have a fellow like Nehemiah Gordon, who, a scholar, a Karaite, who studies these things and is recently got access into the Vatican and looks around and finds different Hebrew versions of the New Testament. And it's like, yeah, but who wrote that? Even can you trust the Hebrew writing? Is it first generation Hebrew? In other words, if the people in the first century were speaking Hebrew and someone wrote down in Hebrew, that would be first generation. But if someone in the first century was speaking Aramaic or Greek, and they wrote it down in Aramaic or Greek, and then it was later translated into Hebrew, and then 1,000 years later, sometime during the Middle Ages, it's copy of a copy or what, and that's what he's now finding, which is very old, but how do you know whether that's reliable, trustworthy Hebrew? Definitions of words might be what you recognize, but does that mean it was the original text? Well, not necessarily. Well, then what do you have? And I could say, well, it just doesn't matter. In a certain sense, it just doesn't matter whether we have the best translation or the best, most accurate version of the Hebrew, the Aramaic, the Greek, because it's not about what's written. Yes, Yeshua said it is written, referring to something back in Deuteronomy, but because we just don't have what was written. And then we could say, well, there's this word called Mishnah, Mem Shin Nun Hey, or Mem Shin Nun Aleph, Mishnah. It's a Jewish use of word. It means Mem is the object or the time or the occasion, and Shana, Shin Nun Aleph, means the number 2 or different or variant. Well, you're not supposed to have different versions, but what the Jews believe is that there was the written Torah, and then there was the verbal Torah, the one that was taught father to son, teacher to student. Just speak the words. It doesn't even have to be written down. And what they believe is that Moshe didn't receive written words. I mean, yes, the finger of Elohim wrote on tables of stone, but he was told. He had a great memory. He remembered it. He wrote stuff down, but then he spoke and taught the elders of Israel, who spoke and taught the people of Israel, because nobody knew how to write. Nobody knew how to read and write. So it was all verbal. That's the Mishnah. So you can't lessen or disparage that and say, oh, them crazy Jews, they have this other regard of the Torah, the verbal thing. Well, they believe that what's handed down throughout the generations of rabbis, you might say, from teacher to student, and on, that's the Mishnah. And then when it was finally written, captured, well, that's the Talmud. But the word Talmud, T-L-M-D, Talmud. Well, the Talmudim are the disciples, but the word disciple comes basically out of the Greek, meaning discipline. So those who are disciplined to learn correctly, well, Talmud, the word lamed is the 12th letter, shepherd staff. Lamed literally means teach, learn, and repetition, to keep going over it and over it. It's like, doesn't mean you have to learn how to read. Talmud is to learn and to teach. So the Talmudim, im is the plural, the Talmudim are the taught ones. Did they know how to read and write? Not necessarily. I mean, I'm saying this because I'm not trying to suggest that you have to learn to read and write to be saved, or you have to read and write to be smarter or better. And a lot of people on the face of the earth can't read or write, and many languages on the earth don't appear in written form. They're just not written. Flemish, for example, and there's a bunch of other languages. The Azeri language in Nigeria was not written, and the Wycliffe Bible translators concocted a written form so that they could write the Bible and give it, at least some books of the Bible, some passages of verses of the Bible, and give it to the people 20 years ago. But before that, it didn't exist. And so what is anybody supposed to do? Well, you got to go on what you're told, what you're taught. And if you're taught one thing, and people articulating phonetics stumble around, or they have different vowels, kadosh, kadesh, kiddush. Well, I could say, oh, those are three different words. They basically mean the same thing, but kuf dalet shin, that's what it's about. It's like, yeah, but if you can't read it, and did the guy remember properly? Well, you better remember. So the people who were designated to be the carriers of history, they don't necessarily have to go wash the dishes and mow the lawn and learn how to build the house or do the plumbing repair. Their job is, you better apply everything you have in your mind to hear, to recall, to memorize, learn with accuracy, because the entire nation is depending on you. And so I might think that we in America just kind of throw off education, but in all the cultures, it's the educated one. It's really critically important. And so how do we, I don't trust it. What? No, we might do well to trust it, though we don't trust our own fake news journalists, whatever other agendas are going on. It's like, what the heck? So what I'm saying is, how do I know what to trust for what reason? If it's a Christian ideology, Christian doctrine, Christian fantasy to believe in salvation so that once you die, you get to go to the heavenlies, do the Jews believe that? Not necessarily. Well, does anybody else believe that who looks at the Bible? Where is it in the Bible does it say you get to go to heaven when you die? Yeshua said, I go to my Father's. I'm going back to my Father's place. And so that where I am, there you can be with me. And in my Father's house are many mansions. Then he goes on to say, if it wasn't so, I would have told you. It's like, well, duh, there, you get to go to heaven when you die. But you read in the Old Testament, and there seems to be the indication that the wicked, the evil, are going to be burned up and turned to dust, and the earth is for the righteous, and he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth, and he's separated between the heavens and the earth. The heaven is the abode of Elohim, but the earth is for man. So Adam, so when you die, are we going to go to a heavenly realm of some other dimension, or is he going to remake the earth and we re-inhabit the earth? And so I know a bunch of people, when I started studying the Hebrew stuff, I've heard people have a conversation that says, well, we don't really go to heaven when we die. We're going to come back to life on the earth. It's like, this whole thing, really? Well, he's going to remake it. It'll be beautiful, wonderful. What? We don't get to go to heaven? We don't get to fly through the clouds? And I don't know. Is it a Christian fantasy that we get to go to heaven when we die? I don't know. Who came up with that? Well, it's based on what Yeshua said, but what did he mean, my Father's house? I'm going back to my Father's house. The word Bet Yod Tav is translated house, but as we saw a couple of weeks ago, Bet Yod Tav is in Ezekiel 43 is translated temple, or it might even be translated as palace. Well, does God the Father have a physical body sitting on a throne in a room called a palace or a temple or a royal place? And is there a bunch of rooms in there? You see, again, English words, and we're trying to figure it out. So if you look at the Hebrew words, it's a whole different mind. It's a whole different way of thinking. It's a whole different picture, if you can even picture it. Does that make it more accurate? If you know you're imagining, the word fantasy, phantom, fantastic, those are all imaginary, using your mind's eye to picture something that you can't draw a picture of. That doesn't mean it's true. That doesn't mean it's better than something that the church fathers or somebody else has already imagined and told us. Is there a rapture? And I know people that say, oh, there's absolutely a rapture. Well, where did they where did the idea of rapture come from? Well, it's back in Thessalonians, Matthew 24. When Yeshua was giving parables, a few of them, about the sower and the seed, the earth, the soil, that's the world, the seed, that's the word of Elohim, and the plants that grow up from the seed are the people. And the seed fell on the good soil, and the seed sprang up and the plants were thriving, but then the seed fell on the pathway or in the rocks or in the weeds, and it started to spring up, or it was trodden on the path and it didn't spring up at all. And it's like, well, then once the good seed sprung up and you had wheats, then it said, there's another parable, that the enemy came by at night and sowed tares or darnel. And then that sprung up, and it's like, then the servants, the angels come to the master and said, hey, an enemy sowed this at night. Should we pull up all the fake wheat? Looks like wheat, but it's not. Said, no, don't pull out the darnel, the tares, because you might pull out some of the good wheat. Let them both grow together. And then at the time of the harvest, when it's ready to harvest, go through and pull out all the tares, the darnel first, and burn them up. And then it'll leave the wheat in the field. So the things that are removed, well, wait a minute. I thought the rapture was take away the believers and then burn up the bad people, the unbelievers on the face of the earth. But according to that parable, if the darnel or tares is taken out first, then the believers, the good righteous ones, are left on the earth. So if there's a rapture, maybe we don't want to get raptured because that's taking away to get burned up. Maybe it's like, no, that's not the way it works. Well, then how does it work? And then some people say, no, some little girl back about 400 years ago had some dream about the rapture, but it was never believed by anybody for 1,500 years of church history. Nobody believed in the rapture. And it's like, is that true? I don't know. I've heard other people protest that and said, no, that's not. It's like, is there a rapture to be expected or not? Well, I don't know. Depends on who you ask. Depends on which church you go to. Do they believe in that doctrine? Well, is there one or not? Certainly there's a resurrection, but a rapture where a bunch of people are grabbed, rescued, delivered, saved out of the face of the earth without having to die and get pulled into a portal of another dimension into the heavenlies, Jesus in the sky with angels. Revelation 19, Yeshua appears in the sky on a white horse, and there's a whole host of heavenly soldiers behind him on other horses. And it's like, well, those are the heavenly hosts. And I've heard people say, those are the deceased humans that have gone to heaven, and they're now coming back with him. And it's like, heavenly hosts, those are angels. Well, are they humans or are they angels? Well, if they're humans, how'd they get there? Because you read that when you die, you lay in the ground until resurrection day. Unless you've already gone up. It's like, what I'm saying is, I have heard over the years so many variations. I have absolutely no idea what to believe or what to expect. I do believe in the resurrection. Yeshua resurrected and said he's the firstborn, the last Adam, the first Adam living and walking on the face of the earth. Okay, so here we are. We are all here doing that also. But he, being as Adam died, resurrected, and lives, and he floated up into the heavens, so we can use that as a model, say we're going to do the same thing. But he's coming back. And when he comes back, is he going to set up his kingdom on the earth for 1,000 years? I heard somebody years ago say, the way you can tell false doctrine is this one simple line. Anybody who thinks that the kingdom of heaven is going to come and reign on the earth is a heretic, an unbeliever, false. Because Yeshua said one sentence, my kingdom is not of this world. Therefore, this person was saying the only true believer in truth, believes that the kingdom of heaven, Christ's reign, is not on the face of the earth and will be in some other dimension, in some other place forever. And anybody who thinks that there's anything back on the face of the earth is an idiot, heretic, infidel, not to be listened to. Well, is that true or not? I have no idea. Maybe he's completely wrong, whoever said that. But that's what they believe, whoever they are. In fact, I've only listened to a couple of rabbis on the internet. One of them, the guy was saying that they believed in coming back to life numerous times on the face of the earth. And it's like, reincarnation? Are you kidding me? You guys believe in reincarnation? I thought that was some Hindu or Buddhist or Oriental. It's like, certainly not Christian. It's like, apparently it's Jewish, but not necessarily all the Jews believe in it. And it's like, Kufia, there's a picture of a sickle harvesting some crop. Here's a Zadi, picture of the resurrection. Resh, some stick figure with wings and some kind of a crown, and that's like a celestial being. Isn't that a picture? Zadi, Kuf, Resh, isn't that a picture of resurrecting and being gathered up unto another status? It looks like those three letters retain that concept, but what are the details of how it works? Pick your favorite ideology. Is it up to you to imagine? But then I heard someone once say, it's your human job to believe in the rapture and believe in the resurrection so that you can get raptured. And if it's like, if you don't believe in the rapture, you won't get raptured. And it's like, what? We're gonna be brought back to life, and Jesus appears in the sky with angels in Revelation 19. But if you didn't believe while you were conscious on the earth, then everybody else flies up into heaven and you don't, and you go, hey, wait a minute, don't leave me here behind. And it's like, so I mentioned last week that there's this concept that the object of faith, or the effort of faith, in some way of thinking as a Christian, is have faith in your faith. In other words, your task is to focus your mental energy and say, I believe in, and state the doctrines. And if you believe in those doctrines, you'll make them come true. Or because those are the true doctrines, you'll play into them being true and they'll happen. Name it and claim it. And if you don't believe in it, it's not going to happen. And it's like, oh, come on. If he's going to rapture me, resurrect me, take me into the heavenly dimension, shouldn't that be by his grace, of his effort? I mean, who am I? I'm just some earthling that I don't even know what to believe or how to do it. Can't I just say, please take me, I'm yours? Does it have to be left up to my effort? And then I would say, well, the real Christian teaching is that nothing we as human beings can do can merit or earn any gift from him. Therefore, it cannot be that my effort or the intensity of my focus derives any benefit to me. That's where I then have to trust my complete relieving myself, releasing any of my grasp, and say, it's all him. It's all by his grace. It's all by his benevolent kindness, compassion, and mercy, that he will reach down into my realm, grab me, and take me to be where he is. Well, that's true. I can believe that. So I can believe different aspects of all these things. But you could say, well, but if one guy says, if you believe that there's anything on earth, you're corrupt. But that's what he says. He said the earth is for the righteous, and he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth, and that the righteous who live now, when they're resurrected, they will come back to the earth and live on the earth. In my Father's house are many mansions, but I heard somebody else once say, in my Father's house are many rooms or many dwellings, and it's like, what does that mean? See, I could look at these Hebrew words and I could change my perspective and say, what if that meant there are many dimensions? There are many types of realms in my Father's dominion. Well, if I was to say these 22 letters are the only disclosed house, dominion, kingdom, realm, he could have had 50 jillion letters, but he gave us 22. He gave us a color wheel of 3 primary, 3 secondary. Some people say 7, if you throw in ultraviolet or something in terms of colors on the color wheel. And I've heard of people who had near-death experiences that they've gone into the heavenly realm and said, there's other colors that I can't describe, but they're not on earth. And it's like, what does that even mean? Give me a clue. No, I can't. There's no words. I can't tell you. That's what people have said. Well, I could say, well, here's 22 letters. If this represent dimensions, tell me some other dimension that's out of our reference. You can't. Our brains are built into, let me say, the dimension of the 22 letters. That's the realm. That's the kingdom where Adam lives, the kuf shape, the circle with the line. So picture the pregnancy, the womb, the circle being penetrated and planted the seed. That's like the universe with the Big Bang occasion, or the beginning of life of matter within the void of space, the pregnancy concept, Adam being given life in the midst of non-life, light being planted into the midst of chosek, the void of tohu vebohu, nothingness. That's the concept right there. Well, couldn't he do that in the future in some other grand way that I can't imagine? Sure, he could. Wherever we live now in this dimension, this time and space, cosmos, matter, consciousness, I could even look at this as a head, and this is drawn actually as the back of the head and the neck, letter kuf. But I could say, well, that's a spark of consciousness. It's having a thought, having a realization. Is the vertical line penetrated into the cerebral mass? Picture of life itself. Can I picture these different things? Well, what if he's saying by just that one letter kuf that no matter if there's nothing there, he can, like an empty womb to a womb that's a capacity, a hollow place that a life is then put within. He can do that at any time, in any phase, in any way. So there can be, we're stuck, we're doomed, there's giants, and we're surrounded by, carnivorous beasts. And he can say, look, I can make anything happen. I can provide loaves and fishes when you're hungry. I can provide a rescue and capture you on eagle's wings and make the Red Sea of reeds open and pass through. That's all kuf picture. So if I say, well, look I don't know if there's a rapture where we're raised up, there's the vertical part of the kuf, into the clouds. Yeshua, when he resurrected, right, the grave opened. There's Pei, Zodi, sprout. Yeshua, the grave opened. Yeshua came out of the tomb, and then 40 days later, he rose up into the clouds. Well, that's a picture of Kuf. And the angel said he's coming back the same way. So there he's coming back from the clouds down to the same place on earth, Mount of Olives. And with him, though he's singular, with him are going to be the hosts, the heavenly realm, following him on their horses. So I can see that in the picture of the Kuf. The round sweeping is the collection of the clouds or the forces, the Zavot, and he, the singular, identified as the Resh. So the sprouting, is that just the resurrection? Sure, but it's also the language coming back. So it's also an idea of like, wow, he can take the dead stick and make it alive. Like Aaron's rod that was put in the Ark of the Covenant, that was put into the Holy of Holies, the Kadosh Kodoshim. So if Aaron's rod that budded is put into the Ark of the Covenant and in the Holy of Holies, the Kadosh Kodashim, I can see that as all picture of the Zodi type. And then Kuf is sure shaped like grabbing something and harvesting, but is that the rapture of the just, or is that the gathering of the tares, of the darnel? Maybe it's both. It's the concept that thing is going to happen whether or not we have the right idea. So that I can sit here and say, the rest status, as I mentioned last week, was who we have chosen to become while we walk in the flesh on the face of the earth in the here and now, time and space, here and now, space and time. Well, how do we do that? That's the noon. See, if the mem is how you mem, noon is the life that you become, the life that develops. Well, the life that went into the tomb, hey, Vav, behold this man, if the Dalit's the door of the, hey, the woman, the feminine suffix is the man who would be put to the weapon. Well, we all got to die. If that's hey, Vav Zion, then this is the tomb, Tet, but Tet Yod is, he says, look at, you're mine. You who have chosen life, you're my personal possession. So Tet's this basket, and Yod is the suffix that is possession. It's mine. My who? The one who owns the kingdom. Yod Vavhe, the Chet. So if I were to try to wrap my mind around this alphabet instead of definitions of words by questionable people or doctrines or things handed down, whether it's by mouth or by writing, if we could just find the original writing, it almost doesn't matter. What I'm saying is if I just wrap my mind around what these letters are saying, then whether or not I have the original script, the purest orthography, or the best version of Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic, or the most ancient Proto-Sinaitic or hieroglyph, or if I find a copy of what Enoch wrote before the flood that Noah and Melchizedek gave to Abraham, and boy, if we could just find that, it almost doesn't matter. If I could just find a snapshot, imagine if there was some sort of time traveler who could go back and see the words that Yeshua wrote in the dirt with his own finger when they wanted, people wanted to stone that lady that was caught in a illicit relationship behavior. That's the only record of him writing anything, is he wrote with his finger in the dust. Boy, then we'd know whether he's writing Paleo-Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek. Yeah, then what are you going to do with that information? It's kind of like, the Da Vinci Code. Leonardo da Vinci's picture of the Last Supper, Yeshua sitting there with his disciples. Yeah, but where's the Holy Grail? He didn't even draw it in the picture. the great mystery. And then the movie that came out by Dan Brown, the book and movie, was that John the Beloved sitting right next to Yeshua was actually not even John, it was Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene was the Holy Grail, carrying the seed of Jesus, propagating the Merovingian order of blue blood royalty of Europe, kings and queens. That's somebody's idea. A lot of people believe it. Doesn't make it true. It's just it's a story. But if there was a Holy Grail, if there really was a cup, a glass, a goblet that Yeshua said, here, this is my blood, drink from it, is the goblet would be sacred? Or certainly his blood would be sacred, let's say, but he's not saying this is my blood. Well, yeah, but if you go to Eucharist or communion, it does change into that, or that's what we're told. But whew, if there was a Holy Grail and somebody found it, like the Ark of the Covenant, there's a Holy Grail sitting there, and if you could pour water or wine and drink something from the Holy Grail, what would you expect to get? Where's the benefit? Where's the win? So I can make up an imaginary list of blessings, of benefits, of saying, if I could just have the best thing that could be a spiritual promise from on high, if it comes through the vehicle of drinking from the Holy Grail, what would I expect to get? Wealth, health, wisdom, some sort of prosperity, fun. What else? Good neighbors, a good government, a good memory, good food to eat. I mean, now, like the top list, health, wealth, prosperity, then you get down to the lesser things. There's stuff. It's like, okay, so in an imaginary world with a Holy Grail, which over the centuries, from what I understand, during the era of the Middle Ages, hundreds of thousands of people at the expense of many millions of lives and millions of dollars worth of expenditure, people suited up and went traveling, whether it was on pilgrimage or whether it was on crusades of battle, to find the Holy Grail just so they could get what? Is any of that even true? But where do you find that? I'm suggesting that it's found right here. So this could be the Holy Grail. Like I said the other day, this could be the Ruach HaKodesh. The expanse between Aleph and Tav is the word Ruach, and if it comes from Elohim, it's Kadesh, Kadosh. It's not human comprehension or human ideology or human doctrine that I'm putting in here. I'm trying to see in the letters, and it just happens to be retained with the paleo-orthography, the graph, the design of like a skeleton, the letter shapes. As a kid, going to the Natural History Museum and you see skeleton of dinosaurs and stuff, and it's like, those are fake. Well, they're real bones they pulled out of the tar pit or out of the ground. And so a skeletal shape is an orthograph. The design of the letters, orthography. And if this really is of Elohim, and I really am allowed meaning it's accurate, I can look at the shape of the letters and the sequence order of the letters and say, there's truth to be perceived, comprehended in this letter sequence. There's truth because this letter sequence and the shape of the letters and the meaning of the letters and the reason for the letters orchestrated specifically between Aleph and Tav is of divine orchestration. Well, who's the divine one? Who is the Theos, the Dios, the God? Well, it's the author of the alphabet. Yeah, but who is that? It's the one who composed the alphabet as a self-referential disclosure. Okay, what's his name? Well, that's what Moshe said. Remember the burning bush, Exodus 3? When I go back and say I have encountered the divine, not even a one, the divine force, the divine eminence, the divine radiance, and the people are going to say, yeah, what's his name? What do you mean these are people are going to say, what's his name? Why would the people say that? Why would they even think he has a name? Or if he had a name, that it could be disclosed? I mean, he said he doesn't have a face, and therefore the face can't be seen, but people claim to see his face. But what he said, Yeshua, I think, said that no one has ever seen his face at any time. We talked about that last week. Moshe, it was said, we saw him face to face, but that was in Panei La Panei. That was an idiom, because he said, when Moshe said, show me your glory, and he passed by and he put him in the cleft of the rock, and he said, you can't see my face and live. So if Elohim says to Moshe, you cannot see my face, then if the text says they stood face to face, that's a concept reference, not actual. And if Yeshua said no one has ever seen the face of Elohim, you can't see his face, then he's got no face. Well, then who are people seeing when they see the face of the Father? I don't know. All I can say is, if I trust what was written and told us, it's not really the Father they're seeing. They claim it is. Their experience is, divine face. I can't make a comment on what they saw or what they think they saw or what they imagined in a zone of a dimension of reality, but all I can say is, based on what the text says, that's not him. Well, then what is him? Is it a him? How do you know it's a he? How do you know it's masculine? There's a Jewish person talking to some friend of mine one time, and the lady, he said something about God, he, blah, blah, whatever. How do you know it's a he? Uh-oh. He goes, well, look at the name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. There you go. That's his name. That's the Father's name. And it's like, isn't Hey the fifth letter, the feminine suffix? Well, then why does Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh end in a feminine suffix? Doesn't that make it feminine instead of masculine? Don't got me. Gosh, what do you do? Go back to Exodus 3. Who shall I say sent me? Ehyeh, Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey. Again, a feminine suffix. But then he said, but Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is my Shem for Zakar, or to Zakar. It doesn't say it's Shem Zakar. You have to look at the way the sentence is structured. But the word Zakar means remember, commemorate, memorialize, stick in your head like a hook, a barb, a fish hook, like the Zodi that gets stuck, like trying to pull a blackberry out type of thing. It's, man, that thing doesn't want to come out of there. And it also means masculine. Masculine is the word Zakar, Zion Kaf Resh. So for Elohim himself, themselves, to say Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the Shem Zakar, that's the masculine reference, masculine consideration. Well, yeah, but where's the feminine consideration? If Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and Aleph-Heh-Yod-Heh end in a hey, there's got to be a feminine consideration. And something I've heard my wife say, it's like, he said he made male and female both in his image. So he somehow has both masculine and feminine aspects. Really? Is that necessarily true? Or is the oneness expressed in 22 capacities, just like white light put through a prism shows up as 3 primary capacities, or 3 primary and another 3 secondary? And well, how many other colors can you get? If he just bifurcated and said, well, here's masculine and feminine, doesn't mean he's masculine and feminine. He's using that as a reference. And if Yahweh Echad is a singularity, but I can look at the Kuf and say the singularity is actually a multiplicity also. Again, is it quality? Is it quantity? Or is it amplification? Maybe it's all that. Maybe there's even, maybe what this is referring to is that in the by and by, after the days of resurrection, whatever we think in a singular consideration is so compounded, so expanded, it's beyond calculation from our present frame of mind. Kuf being the back of the head, showing the mind of the brain, and Resh being the front, being this exalted status. And so I could go back here and say, if the standard human man is destined for death, to be thrown in the grave, but those who belong to Yahweh, those that are in his basket, because he owns us, because we chose life, because we choose life. We are Kaf Lamed and Mem Nun, and from the womb of this crypt of death, there's a sprout. And he said, the seed, Yeshua said, to be the seed that stays alive will just remain singular. But when it dies, it then, the way that nature is, it is refigured, and it'll turn into a plant that grows up. That's a picture of Samach, which bears fruit, ayin, and it's multiplied by the dozens, hundreds, thousands. 5 minutes. That multiplication is the ironing to pay, the zadi, the flower head, the kuf, the raising up to a stature, resh. So this is all coming out of the grave unto an eternal, beyond our calculations. Sheen, just this shining, the El Shaddai, the sheen is the monogram that Jews put on mezuzahs, just that W sort of looking shape. Shaddai. Just the sheen, monogram, a singular graphic. But if I say, well, who is the deity, the theos, the God, the divine? All I know is that if I believe that this 22-letter sequence encapsulated like in the husk, like a seed of ALEF-TAV, you open up ALEF-TAV and inside of the other 20 letters. But see, Aleph and Tav is not one thing. It's the Aleph becoming Tav, because Aleph is the self-referential prefix, I am, I will. It's to yoke up an ox, to have it pull the plow to the mark in the distance, the Tav. And so even looking at ALEF-TAV, it's not a single object. It's this function, like an equation, like a mathematical elaboration. So to Sefer ALEF-TAV, well, you can't Sefer ALEF-TAV. Nah, that's what they say. What do they know? They know all kinds of stuff. They think all kinds of stuff. They believe all kinds of stuff. But if I'm just looking at what the pictures mean, ALEF-TAV is well, if it's self-referential of the author of the ALEF-TAV, I am, I will, then whoever that author is, whether it's a singular or a multiple, whether it's a male or a female, whether it expresses itself in action or form, with a face, without a face, the fact that it is, the fact that the author exists with a consciousness is an aleph, but the fact that the consciousness has a goal, a target, a destination, something to accomplish, that's Tav. And so I can say, well, the idea that we're here for a reason, everything that exists has a reason. That's ALEF-TAV. And then you open up, what is the reason? It's all the stuff in between. And then I could say then, well, if then God is the one who invented ALEF-TAV, who's God? Well, he's outside of ALEF-TAV. Yeah, but who is he? What is he? Was he male or female? Is it singular or multiple? Is it a trinity? Is it a duality? Does it include the devil, or is the devil a spurious agent that spun off, then comes back to harass? In Isaiah, Yahweh says, I make day and I make night. I make good and I make evil. I'm the guy that does the whole thing. It's like, even the devil's work? What? How could? Hey, didn't say it was Christian. Didn't say you understood it. It was a foreign culture or your own culture. It's just like, who is this? Well, then if I could say who this is the one described by the 22 letters, and that's all we got. Everything else is human imagination. But if he gave us the 22 letters, even what the letters look like and what they mean is my own imagination. It's like, well, that's the kit. That's the playing toys. That's the tools. That's the Here's the field. Here's the equipment, and that's what we got. 22 letters. Everything else is somebody else's imagination or somebody else's revelation. And you get Jeremiah 23. Anybody got a word from the Lord? Anybody got a Masayawa? Anybody got some sort of divine presentation? And Yahweh said, if I ever hear you guys say that again, bam, that's it. You're done. That guy and his family, and they're all dead. I'm just gonna check. It's like, what the heck? We're just looking for a divine revelation. Better you should ask, what did Yahweh say? What did he pronounce? Anybody ever hear of Ahmad Basodi? That's what he says in Jeremiah 23. Ahmad Basodi. Secret council, mystery. No, let's have some divine revelation. Let's have some trips up to the heavens and portals opening and dreams. Really? How about an Ahmad Basodi? Is this Ahmad Basodi? What I see of the letters, I mean, those are there. Those are put in position, established in that order. Yeah, but how do you prove it? Mishkan pattern. You sure? Yeah, Yeshua's narrative. There it is. Mashiach, Messiah. Yeah, but what's at the foundation? What's at the foundation is he had a reason for doing it. And we're going to look at that reason in Proverbs 8 in just a minute. Part 4. But we're going to take a break first.